Arsenal are 4 points clear at the top of the Premier League, but we all know they've been here before. So, have they evolved enough to learn from previous mistakes? Well, to delve into this on today's show, brought to you by BOYLE Sports, we've got JJ Bull. First, we've got John Mackenzie. So this is how this is going to work. We're going to go through a few different factors that have hindered Arsenal over the last few seasons. We're going to learn whether or not they've solved those problems or whether or not those problems are actually still affecting them. So let's start with this one, gents. Injuries. This is quite prominent actually, because if you think about it, Gabriel's just come off international break, injured. Do Arsenal have enough in their arsenal to deal with this?
Well, they've got quite a few injuries at the moment. In fact, they've got Jesus, Havertz, Madueke might be back, we don't know, Odegaard, Martinelli, Gyökeres. Lots of players are injured at the moment, but Arsenal tried to deal with it in the summer by having the highest net spend of any team in the Premier League. So you buy more players, you fix it in theory. Last season they had long spells without, it was Saka, Odegaard, Havertz, all the lads got injured at a certain point. There are some of us who feel that this was maybe somewhat inevitable. Now it's not always exactly the case, but there's a theory that you are more susceptible to injury if you have accumulated fatigue. So if you're playing lots and lots of games in a row, it's more likely you might pick up something. And if you look at how often, for example, Bukayo Saka has played since the 21-22 season, he started 36 games, but he played 38, then he played 38 games, then he played 35 games. Eventually you accumulate fatigue.
Up with you.
Last season, for example, he's out for 12 games on game week 18 and Arsenal end up finishing 15 points worse off. A coincidence?
No.
Well, there we go. So this summer, Arteta looked to bring in a bunch of players that would mean he's got cover. So he's got 2 players for every position, basically. He's got players that offer different tactical solutions. He's got players that are first team ready, like Eze, Madueke. Because at the start of the season, you might have gone, where's Eze going to play? Where's Gyökeres going to play next to Havertz? How are they going to fit them all in? It turns out, by having those players, you have players who are good enough to be in the first team, so they can push them for places. But also, when they have injuries, which they have, they've got high-level cover, replacements to step in. So he can not only rotate his team, he can have different tactical options, but when they get injured, which is what keeps happening now, they've got high-level cover, so they're okay.
So they've resolved that issue, yes?
I believe they have.
Okay, nice. Let's move on to the next one, John. Oh, set pieces, come on.
That's all we talk about with Arsenal, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it's because Arsenal are very good at set pieces.
Yeah, they are.
But I think it is worth stepping back and taking a look at how they fit set pieces within Arsenal's general approach. So we talk a lot about how Arsenal are one of the best out of possession sides in the world. I think a big part of the reason for why they can be so good out of possession is because they can be a little bit more conservative in possession. They don't need to take as many risks. Yes, that is going to result in fewer goals, but Arteta knows that Arsenal can make up those goals in set pieces, and they play in a way that actually produces a lot of set pieces. And so, there is a logic there that works out. But I guess the big question for me, and has been for a few seasons, is sustainability of this approach. And I've got some data on the board in front of me just to explain what I mean by this, because if Arsenal are relying on set pieces to help them break open games, that means if their set piece efficiency drops a little bit, then maybe it could impact their form and momentum in seasons. And the data actually sort of shows that is the case. So what I've got here is I've got some red lines. This red line is just the points per game average for Arsenal through seasons. So you can see we've got the last 5 seasons. And essentially this little dotted red line that you can see on each of these mini season runs, it shows you whether or not Arsenal become more strong through the season or maybe drop off through season. So we've got 2 seasons where they drop off, 22-23 and 24-25. Now 24-25 we all know about that one. 22-23 was the one where they started and they were a long way ahead and then eventually got caught up by City. What's really interesting though is that if we compare these seasons against set piece efficiency, which we've got running along the bottom of the viz here, this just shows how many goals Arsenal are scoring per 100 set pieces. And it seems to correlate that when Arsenal are sort of operating above about 5.5 goals per 100 set pieces, it correlates to those seasons where they've had strong form going through to the end of the season. So these seasons here, we've got 6 goals here in 21-22, 6.4 goals per 100 set pieces in 23-24, and this season an incredible 8.1 goals per 100 set pieces, which is the highest that they've been across the last 5 seasons. In these instances, you can see that gives them really good momentum. In these seasons, their points per game ramp up through the course of the season. The seasons where they drop below 5 or around 5, as we can see from last season, those are the seasons where Arsenal have tailed off in the second half of the seasons as well. So the big question for me here, I suppose, is set-piece efficiency seems to be an important part of Arsenal maintaining momentum through the course of seasons. And I guess the big question now, we've just talked about Gabriel.
Oh, the injuries as well, yeah.
Yeah, being off. I guess that then raises questions. Will Arsenal's set-piece efficiency retain the level that it's at now, which seems quite high? Will it drop off? And if it does, what impact will that have on them overall?
So have they solved that problem?
I don't think necessarily we can say that they have solved that problem. And I think what's really interesting about this is that so many of the different factors we're going to talk about actually fall back on each other, right? So we're talking about injury depth. And yes, Arsenal have much better depth now, but if you lose a player like Gabriel, if you lose set-piece takers like Saka or Rice, that is going to have a knock-on impact on their set-piece efficiency. And it doesn't matter how much depth you've got unless you've got replacement-level players, which you don't. So these are the sorts of questions that we have to, I think, keep at the back of our mind as the season goes on. So I'm going to put this one on, like, I don't think this is ever going to be a thing that you solve, but I think the question is, like, will that momentum retain through the rest of the season?
You're still yet to say yes or no, I think, on this little segment. But yeah, we'll get there. All right, let's move on. JJ. Ooh, I like this one. The lack of a world-class striker. Come on, Victor Gyökeres. They've done it. Come on, JJ. Say it is so.
Well, I think that we should think about why we all thought or said that they should get a world-class striker in the first place, and it's mostly because of how Arsenal play. Because, as we all know, what they often do is they work the ball through the lines and they get to the final third, and then everything kind of slows down, and they would end up doing this thing where they circulate it because the other team is in a block, so obviously it's hard to break that down. Yeah. So what you think you'd need is someone in the middle who you can hit crosses to and header in. And they've had Havertz, and Havertz has done quite well at it, you know. But you think if you have an actual, like, a goal hunter, someone in there who can, like, hunt and find it, the goal, you think they'd be a lot better. That's what we all thought they should do. So they brought in Victor Gyökeres. But do you know what? Arteta already had one of those.
Who?
Do you know the player with the highest XG per 90 since the 22-23 season at Arsenal?
Trossard?
It's Eddie Nketiah.
Oh!
He was a goal hunter.
The goal machine in Nketiah that went to Crystal Palace?
Yeah, that's the one.
Interesting.
Now, you have to also look at his goals per 90. These are excluding penalties. So it's expected goals per 90 excluding penalties.
It's a good stat, by the way.
His conversion rate, thanks very much. It was Opta. So it's 0.38. So obviously he's lower in goals scored versus his expected goals. Well, Kai Havertz, actually, 0.42 versus 0.42. He's actually a lot better than we think he is. And he misses a lot of chances. We see it with our eyes.
He's not a natural striker, though, so you kind of understand.
I know, and he does so much more as well. He drops in and helps out and does all the things that you want of that player in Arteta's system, whereas Gyökeres is more of like a goal hunter. However, look at the early. This is very early, so you can't, it's 10 games in, but he's got similar goal creation numbers, or expected goals without penalties, to Kai Havertz. But his efficiency level, it's not that far off of what Arsenal have had in the past. Maybe he'll get better with it. He's also adjusting to a new league, new teammates, all that kind of stuff. And he is proving to be a goal hunter. You can see he's getting his shots away in the box where you want him to. Look how close some of his shots are. Inside the 6-yard box.
That's where we want him.
That's what they want. Some of them, these are from corners, to be fair. Kai Havertz, turns out not that dissimilar, so it's pretty good. I think Havertz would have played an awful lot more if he'd been there. Gyökeres tends to take his touches, like you can see this is where he tends to take his touches for Sporting last season. He'd run in behind and often go in the left channel, whereas Havertz, it turns out, is a lot more on the right-hand side. I didn't even realise that. And this is Gyökeres from this season in the Premier League. So you can see that this is what he's doing in these sorts of situations here. But the point is that, like, Havertz does a lot more off the ball and also in link-up play, things like that. Gyökeres is not, that's what he's not good at, is get there to run in behind. And I think he probably wouldn't have played so much if Havertz had been there. Because Gyökeres, no player for Arsenal has touched the ball less per 90 this season. No player in the Premier League. But Gyökeres has also had the most touches in the attacking penalty area if you remove Madueke. I think he's doing basically what they want him to do. He is scoring not as many as goals as you maybe think for the price, but it's okay.
So, is that a yes or a no? Have Arsenal solved this problem?
When Havertz is back, I think they're okay.
Yeah, okay. It's kind of like maybe, maybe not. Okay,
I'm not sure.
All right, we're not sure. Sample size is way too small. All right, let's go into this one. Who we got? Ooh. Lack of plan B. I guess this is something Mikel Arteta has been criticised over the last few seasons, but perhaps have they solved it?
We talked about this a lot at the beginning of the season because it looked back then as though what we were seeing from Arsenal is the introduction of other ways of playing. JJ's talked about how they like to build up through the thirds and pin opponents back. And as we know, that has proved to be an effective way of playing in the past. But what we're seeing now is teams, the balance, the needle is shifting back in favour of the teams defending in those situations. And so what we're starting to see now is these elite teams trying to introduce levels of maybe a bit more transitional football or using artificial transitions to speed up the play, because when you do that, you have more space to attack and it can make it easier for you to score goals. So the beginning of the season, we were quite excited because it seemed from the data that Arsenal were moderating how fast they were playing in certain games. So on the viz here, you can see Manchester United, that game, you may remember it, that was the game where Arsenal had 4 or 5 quite direct attacks where as soon as the ball came into the penalty area, they were trying to get in behind the Man United midfield, reflected in the average direct attack speed per game, which is just how quickly are you moving the ball towards the opposition goal when you have the sequences of possession. And then the following game was against Leeds, which was much less. They didn't need to use transition as much in that game. And so it felt to me, and I think from the next few games, particularly the Forest game where they introduced a bit more Roberto De Zerbi football, it felt as though Arsenal were actually finally introducing a bit more diversity into their tactical approach, which, as we said at the time, seems to be the way football is going. Interestingly enough, from that point onwards, what we've seen is actually gradual decline, as you can see on the viz here through time. The attacking numbers have in terms of direct attack speed, have dropped right off. Now, there are obviously explanations for this. We've already talked about injuries, but I think if we break down some of the injuries in particular, we can see why more recently they may have slowed the game down, because we've got Ødegaard out for the last 4 games in the Premier League. Martinelli, direct attacker, him being injured on the bench for a few games, that might explain why that has dropped off a little bit more. Noni Madueke, again, another player who's going to be really good at running into that space. And then Gyökeres injured midway through the Burnley game and then out for the following game. So there's an explanation for why this might happen. But I guess it brings us back to what we were saying before, which is, yes, this is an area where Arteta has fixed things. But again, it is dependent on your ability to have depth. It's not just the case that if you have depth, you can then say, well, we've got good players who can come in. If those players can't perform the sorts of roles that you're expecting them to play, and then you maybe don't have that tactical diversity anymore. So I think what's happened here is that Arsenal have had some injuries, and as a result, Arteta has gone back to doing what he knows that the team can do well, to tide them over for this time. When these players are back, I expect to see this tactical diversity return. But I think it is an interesting question as to how much are they going to be impacted by injuries, because if they are, then maybe they aren't able to do as much of this diverse tactical approach that they might like.
So in a typical John sense,
I've said nothing.
Yes, but no, but yes, but no, but yes, but no, maybe.
They've definitely solved it.
Yeah.
The big question is whether or not they can consistently use the players that they have to be able to do it. And again, I think another question is whether or not Arteta is going to become too conservative and just say, well, let's just go back to what we know we can do so well. I think you could still be experimental with the players that he has at his disposals, but there's a bit of risk there. And as we've said, a lot of his approaches are based around sort of reducing the risk and that carrying you through. So we wait and see.
Let's move on. This one, interesting. Let's see. Lack of physicality, JJ. Come on, with the big man up front, surely that solved that a little bit.
Well, it's the thing that they've kind of had physicality for a while now. It was like 2 years ago, I think I did a video and said that they were a little bit like Stoke, which seems to have caught on a bit.
The Pulis effect.
Yeah, but then they were always really big, right? But and no team has scored more headed goals than Arsenal since the 22-23 season. Now, headed goals is not the only sign that they're physical, right? But you're more likely to score headers, I would suggest, if you're a big lad.
So this is very true.
They're not just like tall, they're also they're strong, they're fast, they're hard to play against, they're aggressive with it, like they're also really, really disciplined. So if you have, you've seen those videos of all the robots, the different factories they're making, they're on the row and they're walking in line.
Yeah.
So you imagine those, but they're like big people. That's much harder to play against than small technical players.
This is true.
And like Sander Berge played against Arsenal and he said, in their 4-4-2 without the ball, it just seems so compact. They seem so comfortable staying there. It's rare that we play against teams that find it so beneficial that the opponent has the ball. They seem so compact. Everyone covers the right space at all times. It's difficult to find where to attack them and where to overload. They are just so well drilled. Basically, it's not just that they're strong as well, it's that they do the running, that they cover the ground, they're fast enough to get back and recover. They have kind of everything locked down, and Arteta's kind of made this I don't want to call it the meta, but the thing that lots of teams do now is you can gain advantages tactically, you can gain advantages with technical players, but you can also gain advantages athletically. Did I say that as a word?
Athletically, yes.
Athletically. And that's what they've kind of done by bringing in these big players. And so you see other teams do it. And if you think back to like Stoke, the reason I thought of it in the first place, like smaller teams should get, not when I say smaller, I mean like smaller clubs, you know. You'd expect them to get relegated because their players aren't as good. But those teams, like Stoke especially, managed to survive and punch above their weight by exploiting things like set pieces and physicality, and they were horrible to play against. And so why wouldn't you do that as a big team?
That's true, good point. And actually, I'm thinking about the great Arsenal team, the Invincibles. That was a big team. Henry, Vieira, Campbell. I mean, that was really, really tall team. So you might have a point
Horrible
there.
to play against.
Horrible to play against, but also scored some really good goals as well. Well, funny enough, another team struggling with their physicality is Newcastle United. Here's Sam Tai to tell us why.
Welcome to What's Changed, presented by BOYLE Sports. Newcastle United are struggling in the Premier League this season. They're just 2 points above the drop zone, and a big factor in that is they are yet to win a game away from home. So, why is that? Let's investigate. First up, playing away from home in the Premier League is hard. Half the division is averaging 2 points per game or more at home, and the Magpies know full well what kind of a difference a raucous home crowd can make. Also, there's plenty of evidence that Eddie Howe's high-intensity style struggles with the European football schedule. When you play every 3 days, it's hard to sprint and press more than your opponents. Newcastle's superpower used to be their physicality and tenacity in midfield. These three would just bully teams on their own patch, but Premier League teams have recruited well to combat that. Now, they all have physical, tenacious midfielders. So it's no coincidence that Newcastle's dual success rate away from home has steadily fallen over the years. Where once they were fourth in the league, they're now close to bottom. Howe may need to find another way to compete on the road to get Newcastle back to where they want to be.
All right, this is it. The final one. Let's see what it's going to bring up. Oh, how could we forget? Manchester City. I mean, the thorn in Arsenal's side for many a season, especially the 22-23 season, John. What are we saying this time around?
Yeah, and I guess this is a fun one because we don't know what level Manchester City are at right now. So, yeah, in the past, Manchester City have always managed to catch Arsenal up. This is just an XG for and against rolling plot. So what we can see is, yeah, last season, everything goes horribly wrong.
That is funny, that one, isn't it?
It is funny, yeah. I mean, they become obviously very unable to defend midway through the season, and then claw their way back towards the end of the season. This season, it's a different story. As you can see, they're back to sort of a workable level of keeping their XG high and their XGA lower. And yeah, I suppose at this point in time, it's hard to know exactly what level City are at. So if we compare where they've been so far this season to where they were in 5 seasons ago, you can see they were just dominant back then, clearly just putting up well over double the XG they were conceding. But obviously, if you actually map 25-26 season onto 23-24 season, we can see that City started off a little bit slower there and then grew into the season. So I suppose the big question with City is, are they going to go through that period of growth and get to a point where they are able to develop some kind of momentum? I have a tendency to think that it's much less likely to happen this time around than in previous seasons, in part because Guardiola is having to go through a bit of an evolution from a tactical point of view. So I think that this is the season for Arsenal to really drive their advantage home. And that's what I guess winning the Premier League is all about, right? You've got to go out there and win it. You can't rely on other teams not winning it, as it were. I think this is the season to do it. But yeah, it could be the case that City are going to at some point start rolling, which is what they do. Mm-hmm. This is Guardiola just speaking before the Liverpool game. He said, all we can do is win our games and be close. It looks like every time is closer and closer, but we're in early November and nobody can win the title then. So I think what he's saying here is we're starting to look as though we can challenge Arsenal now. We're looking closer and closer to Arsenal. But at this point in time, he's just saying you can't really win the league at this point in the season. In fact, as he says, you can lose it at this point, but you cannot win it. So I'm pretty confident that Arsenal are going to win the league still, on the basis of the other teams. Obviously, Liverpool have dropped off as well. But yeah, I guess there will be that worry in the heart of Arsenal fans who've been through this before and seen that City team go on to a bit of a grind at the end of the season. So.
Okay, well, you both definitely had Arsenal top in our revised Premier League predictions. He's going for yes still. JJ?
I still think it's too early. But yeah, they'll be fine.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football.